Blessings, BookTube. We're here with the fourth labor of Hercules, a series of mysteries, the last mysteries of Poirot's distinguished career. Hercule Poirot, or Hercules Poirot, is solving mysteries related to the original 12 labors of Hercules. And so I'll quickly read you the labor as it appears in the original, which is in the Bibliotheca of Apollodorus, and then we'll get into the Hercule case, and you're going to enjoy it. Here we go. So as a fourth labor, he ordered Hercules, to bring the Erymanthian boar alive. Now that animal ravaged Sophis, sallying from a mountain which they call Erymanthus. So passing through, Pholoi was entertained by the centaur Pholus, a son of Silenus, by a Melian nymph. He set roast beef before Hercules, while he himself ate his meat raw. But when Hercules called for wine, he said that he feared to open the jar, for it belonged to the centaurs in common. But Hercules, bidding him of good courage, opened it, and not long afterwards, scenting the smell, the centaurs did arrive at the cave of Pholus, armed with rocks and furs. The first who dared to enter, Anchius and Agrius, were repelled by Hercules with a shower of brands, and the rest of them he shot and pursued as far as Malea. Thence they took refuge with Chiron, who, driven by the Lapiths from Mount Pelion, took up his abode at Malea. As the centaurs cowered about Chiron, Hercules shot an arrow at them, which, passing through the arm of Adonis, stuck in the knee of Chiron. Distressed at this, Hercules ran up to him, drew out the shaft, and applied a medicine which Chiron gave him. But the hurt proving incurable, Chiron retired to the cave, and there he wished to die, but he could not, for he was immortal. Here, however, Prometheus offered himself to Zeus to be immortal in his stead, and so Chiron died. The rest of the centaurs fled in different directions, and some came to Mount Malea, and Eurytion to Pholo, and Nessus to the river Evenus. The rest of them Poseidon received at Eleusis and hid them in a mountain. But Pholus, drawing the arrow from the corpse, Pholus was the original centaur host, if you remember, drawing the arrow from the corpse, wondered that so little a thing could kill such big fellows. Howbeit it slipped from his hand, and lighting on his foot, killed him on the spot. So when Hercules returned to Pholo, he beheld Pholus dead, and he buried him and proceeded to the boar hunt. Finally, and when he had chased the boar with shouts from a certain thicket, he drove the exhausted animal into deep snow, trapped it, and brought it to Mycenae. Now, there's a lot to talk about in terms of the interlude with the centaurs, not least of which, of course, is of the switching of immortality, allowing Chiron to die, and allowing what's his name to get immortality. Chiron is important among the centaurs. I believe it's Chiron, yes, because he was sort of the mentor for a lot of the heroes, like Perseus, Theseus. I can't remember exactly all who. He trained them in battle and things of that nature. So he's a big deal, and that's probably why Hercules regretted him taking it in the knee. And the little bit about the arrow dropping on his host's foot is the only bit that I will probably talk about in the Hercule Poirot story. So you see, when he finally gets down to it, he dispenses with the boar almost as an afterthought, right? So that's also interesting. But we'll dwell a little bit more on the boar in the Hercule Poirot story called the Erymanthian Boar. So basically, Hercule gets given this note inviting him to help out with this mystery. There's a killer name of Marasco. And Marasco is meeting his gang up in the mountains and at this resort. And so the guy in the funicular station, funicular is like the sort of tram dangling tram that goes up mountains. I don't know how else to describe it. The station master gives him this note telling him that, Marsko's going to meet his gang up there, and that there's a undercover policeman, Inspector Drouet, up there on the case. But that Hercule Poirot could probably move more easily as an unknown guest. And would he help out with the case? Which he's super pleased to do, because in the note that he receives says to him at the end, something basically calling Marsko the Boar. So you have it for your hand if you thought to be a mere tourist. Good hunting, the Boar. Here it goes, yeah. It is important, my friend, that Marsko should be taken and taken alive. He is not a man, he is a wild boar. So when Hercule hears this, he's like, yeah, this is my case, the next case, the Boar. So we're going to go up and catch this boar among the guests and staff of this resort. Of course, the funicular is disabled, and it becomes a true closed circle mystery. Not only that, in this case, without communications either. So they're trapped up in the mountains. The people that he rode up with in the funicular being way more guests than is usual for this time of the year, and therefore the staff at the hotel being quite small. So one of the first things you need to know when you have a closed circle mystery like this is you need to have an accurate count of how many people you're dealing with. So right away, that's going to be interesting, right? Who are the regulars up there? Who are the regular guests? Who are the irregulars? Who are the staff turnover, all that kind of stuff. So this becomes very important. What else to say about this? We mentioned in the last case that in which I laid out some of the conditions that a YouTuber name of Summation Gathering posited some characteristics of Christie stories. And one of the things he said is that Christie weaves a super great job at weaving a complete other plot that you follow that you think is the mystery or the adventure. And so you're sort of presented with two stories in one. And that is true in this story. But when you think of the shortness of these stories, the economy of it, it creates some interesting problems. So, especially if you've got characters of a double nature, right? For one is the Playfair problem. So, like, you've got staff, you might only see them once or twice. And so, whether or not you can notice, how well they do their job, or where they might have come from in their out-of-work life, things of that nature, you really only got the one chance to spot it. I do think Christie, as always, plays fair, but in some of it, you have to be really on the ball to catch it. Other things that happen are that relate to this is typology, right? So a lot of the characters, and Christie does this anyway with ethnographies and class stuff as well between servants and doctors and that. You could see this in the funicular. So riding up in the funicular, you've got this American character. He ends up saving the day, sort of saving Poirot's life in a way. So it's but here's how he's painted. It's great and shows the humor of Christie, which is another thing that Summation Gathering mentioned as a characteristic of Christie's. So they're in the funicular, and this guy, of course, as Poirot sizes him up in one look, says, "Oh, this American's going to try to talk to me," and of course he does. You find the dialogue; it's so funny. On the seat opposite was an American tourist. The pattern of his clothes, his overcoat, the grip he carried, down to his hopeful friendliness and naive absorption in the scenery, even the guidebook in his hand, all gave him away, proclaiming him a small-town American seeing Europe for the first time. In another minute or two, Poirot judged he would break into speech. And typical American, he's got a gun. His wistful dog-like expression could not be mistaken, dog-like. So then you've got him. You got on the other side of the carriage, now you've got this tall, distinguished-looking man, grayish hair, big curved nose, reading a German book. He has the strong mobile fingers of a musician or a surgeon. Indeed, he ends up being a surgeon. Germans are often presented as very cultured, right? Somewhat suspicious, but now, interestingly, talking about Poirot himself, his characterization is a little interesting because he comes off, of course, as very cultured, a little bit pompous, but of course, a little also because the Belgians were refugees in England, right? So in the war, obviously, Belgium was the seat of the war and suffered greatly. So a lot of Belgians end up in Britain. So they're also a little bit, obviously out of their element, a little bit bristly, right? Because, they know that they're looked down on by these British, and, they know that they're super, sophisticated. In fact, the note says, Poirot, I recognized you immediately. And Poirot says, of course you did, by my magnificent mustaches. Anyway, so you got this American, you got this German. Who else have we got? So you can see that the characters are very, you don't have a long time in a short story to develop rich, deep characterization, right? And so sometimes this can come off a bit lazy, but it also, but it's not. And I hate this dichotomy where people are like, oh, I like plot-driven books, I like character-driven books. What they fail to understand is that all good books have both, of course, and they just don't understand that there's other ways of characterization through dialogue, characterization through action, not just characterization through interiority and psychology and trauma. There is plot through interiority, plot through psychological drama. So all of it exists together, and especially, of course, here in a murder mystery, these types matter very much. So the surgeon, for example, the weapon. So of course there are follow-up murders. Oh, the other people in the funicular are these 3 card sharks, basically, and I'm not giving anything away when you think that they might be the henchman going up to meet what's his face, the master killer. But they jump some people and try to kill Poirot when they find out he's a detective as well, because someone comes in the middle of the night and ruffles Poirot's room, rifles his room. But Poirot had the forethought not to drink the coffee because he knew something. And so he's not drugged, and he watches everything they do. So they find the planted papers saying that Poirot is a detective. So when the 3 of them come to try to kill Poirot, luckily Poirot gets rescued. But they've already done the job on the waiter, who may or may not be the undercover policeman, as well as another character. And I'll leave it at that, except to say, these are clues that are given. I'm not giving it away. I think it gives it away. But one of them is completely disfigured by the razor, and the other is severely cut up in the face by the razor. So the razor did put me in mind a little bit of the small arrow, right? The small little weapon, and being dropped on the centaur's foot. Now, the other things about the boar. So a boar, if you think of a boar, first of all, they are brutal, but they are not dumb brutes. Being porcine, pigs are incredibly intelligent, right? So boars are incredibly intelligent. So that's one thing to know about Poirot's adversary here. And another is vicious when cornered. So famously, boars can outclass hunting dogs. But they are hunted by hunting dogs. Why? Because hunting dogs they have this sense of scent. And one of the things that's amazing about sense of scent is it gives you a picture in time. So it gives you history, what went before. And that's going to be really important in this case. And so even though the dogs, once the boar is cornered, the boar turns on and usually eviscerates several of the dogs before it's taken down by the hunter, nonetheless, dogs are still used for this reason. So the scent ability. Now, I mentioned Poirot's ethnicity. So the thing to remember about French characters speaking in a sort of Frenchified English is also worth noticing with translations. I see people talk all the time on BookTube about translators, evaluating translators, which I always wonder how they do. I've done translation vers and tem into and out of languages I speak, and I barely feel qualified to judge most translations, let alone in languages I don't speak. I guess they're judging them just by their readability, but that can be a really an easy way to do great injustice to the original, to make it overly readable in the target language. But anyway, when you're translating into English, because of the Norman conquest, and here we have the class system again, because the French were on top. It wasn't just because France was the lingua franca of the Enlightenment, but also the Normans were in charge, right? Which is why the names for our animals in English are for the live version, and the French get to eat the French version. So, cow is from the Anglo-Saxon, but beef is from boeuf. The French for cow is they get to eat what the poor Anglo-Saxons had to muck out and raise. But anyway, so if you choose a French rendering of something, you can really change the register if you too consistently easily translate French into the obvious cognates. I'll give you an example. If I say to you, I'm going on a voyage, right? So a quick, easy translation of je vais voyager in French. It certainly is of a whole other different register than if I say to you, I'm going on a trip, right? The more Germanic options. So it can be easy with characters that are using a Frenchified English, or in translations that overly translate with the Latin Romance options, to make language of a higher register than it would otherwise ordinarily be. So this becomes important when you look at Christie's use of servants and class distinction, and doctors, right? We've got a doctor in this case as well. So that's another thing that led to perhaps solving the case. Is there anything else I could tell you without giving everything away? I'll give you the time element, the closed circle, the typology, the fact that there's a double story going on. I think I've told you everything I can without telling you the actual solutions. You've got all the information that you need there. It was a good twist. It caught me. I sort of fell for the alternative narrative, which was also clever. So you sort of got two clever narratives in one. And I don't think there's anything else more that I wanted to say about this this mystery. It's a lot of fun. Give it a read. I think it's the best so far of this series in terms of the actual mystery itself. Its link to the original is very tentative, isn't it? I mean, just let's call this killer the Boar, right? So I've maybe tortured it a little bit more than I should have in terms of the hunting and the other mythological stuff I brought in, but trying to overstate a weak case. But I think here Christie is to be forgiven when you think about the original, as I just read to you, of that boar hunt being basically an afterthought of 2 sentences to the whole side to the whole centaur side story there. And I didn't try to link the centaur side story to this story. I don't think Christie intended it. And I didn't want to go even further afield than I had already gone with the mythology. So there you go. Hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully some of what I said made a little bit of sense. Give it a read. Tell me if you think I gave you too much information or not enough information. I'm struggling, as you know, since I'm not normally a person to bury the lead in terms of I like to give as much information about a text as possible. And in mysteries, of course, I won't spoil the ending. But in most of my reviews, I do use spoilers since they're old classics and the value added on this story, even when you know the whole story is so great that you're going to want to read it anyway to see how they did what they did. I don't think I gave it away too much in this case. I think I'm getting better at it. All right, that's enough for that. Thank you for listening. We'll see you for the 5th labor of Hercules soon. Bye.